My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I was 40 years old, married for 9 years, and I believed, without question, that my wife Michelle and I had built something real. We had a house we were proud of, a routine that worked, and a kind of quiet trust I never thought to examine. So when she left for a girls' weekend with 3 friends from her office, I didn't think twice. I dropped her at the airport, told her to have fun, and went back to my normal life for 3 days. She came home smiling. That's the detail I keep returning to because the smile was real and everything underneath it wasn't. Within the first hour, I noticed things so small I almost dismissed them. She avoided my eyes when she talked about the trip. She kept her phone face down on the counter, something she'd never done before. When I asked what restaurant they had tried on Saturday night, she paused half a second too long before answering, and the answer didn't match what she'd texted me from the trip itself. I didn't say anything that night. I'm not a man who reacts in the moment. I watch, I wait, and I think. But something in me had already shifted, quietly, permanently. Over the next few days, small inconsistencies kept surfacing. She mentioned a hotel view that didn't match photos she'd sent me during the trip. She referenced a dinner on a night she'd told me she was exhausted and went to bed early. Nothing was dramatic on its own. Together, they formed a pattern that felt rehearsed, like a story polished in advance rather than a memory recalled naturally. The first real crack came from a bank notification, a charge from a boutique hotel in the same city, but on a different night than the one she'd told me the group stayed there. I didn't mention it. I opened our shared cloud backup instead, the one linked to her old phone that she'd forgotten was still syncing after her upgrade, and found a folder of photos that had never made it to the group chat she'd shown me. In them, she wasn't with her 3 girlfriends. She was at a rooftop bar with one man, a man I recognized instantly, David, her coworker, a man who had sat across from me at company barbecues, who had shaken my hand and told me more than once how lucky I was to have her. I sat with that photo for a long time before I did anything else. I began working quietly, the way I approach everything that matters. I pulled up old rideshare receipts tied to her email and found a car that had picked her up from the airport hotel at 11 at night and dropped her off at an address that wasn't the hotel where the group was staying. I found a deleted voice message recovered from an old backup where her voice was warmer and softer than I'd heard in years, talking to someone who clearly wasn't her girlfriend's. I checked her location history, quietly enabled on our family plan for emergencies years ago and forgotten since. It placed her, for 6 hours on Saturday, at an address 3 miles from the hotel, an apartment building based on the PIN, not a restaurant or bar. Every piece confirmed the last, and still, I said nothing to her directly. I wasn't ready to accuse her from anger. I wanted to accuse her from certainty. I met with a divorce attorney the following week, under the pretense of a financial planning consultation, so no one at her circle would hear a whisper. He was sharp, direct, and told me plainly what I needed to do before I said a single confrontational word to my wife. Secure documentation of our joint accounts, understand the house's title status, and gather evidence properly so nothing I found could later be dismissed as speculation or overreach. I followed his instructions exactly. I made copies of financial statements. I documented the property records. I quietly moved nothing, changed nothing, alarmed no one. I simply prepared. The way you prepare for a storm, you already know is coming. Meanwhile, Michelle kept living exactly as she had before. She hugged me after work. She asked about my day. She made dinner on Thursday like always. That contradiction, a woman capable of real tenderness sitting across from me while carrying a secret that could end our marriage, was the hardest part of those weeks. I wasn't grieving a stranger. I was grieving someone I still, in some complicated way, loved. The final piece came almost by accident. David's assistant, someone I'd met once at a holiday party, mentioned to a mutual friend that David had been acting stressed about a work trip that overlapped suspiciously with Michelle's weekend away. The same city, the same dates. That detail made its way back to me indirectly, and it was the last confirmation I needed. This wasn't a one-time lapse. It had been planned, coordinated, built in advance by 2 people who thought they were careful enough not to get caught. I decided the confrontation would happen on my terms, not in a moment of accidental discovery, but deliberately, with everything already secured. I chose an ordinary Tuesday dinner. Nothing about the evening signaled what was coming. We ate, she talked about her week, and after she set her fork down, I placed a folder on the table between us. Inside were the photographs from the cloud backup, the rideshare receipts, the bank statement from the boutique hotel, the location data, printed with timestamps. I didn't raise my voice. I asked her one question. Can you explain why you were at this address for 6 hours on Saturday, when your friends say you were with them the whole time? She tried to laugh it off first, said the location app must have glitched. Then she claimed she'd stepped away briefly to meet an old friend. Then, as I turned each page and let the facts do what emotion never could, her explanations collapsed one after another until there was nothing left to explain. She admitted it, the affair, David, months of it, building since a work conference nearly a year before. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply told her that I already knew everything and that I needed her to hear that from herself, not from me. What followed wasn't loud, but it was thorough. Word of the affair eventually reached her company, partly through an internal review after David's own erratic behavior drew attention from HR. He was quietly let go months later, after it became clear he'd used company travel schedules to arrange time with a colleague's wife. His career, the one he'd protected so carefully by keeping his hands clean in public, unraveled anyway. He didn't fight for her. When the situation became inconvenient for him, he distanced himself entirely, leaving her to face the fallout alone. Michelle's reputation didn't survive intact either. Co-workers who once admired her started keeping their distance. A promotion she'd been expecting quietly went to someone else. Friends who'd known about the affair or suspected it stopped calling as often. She lost far more than a marriage in the months that followed, and none of it was something I orchestrated. It was simply the natural cost of a lie built on people who trusted her. Our divorce proceeded methodically, exactly as my attorney had outlined months earlier. Because I'd protected the documentation early, because I'd never reacted rashly, and because the paper trail I'd built was airtight, I kept the house and the financial stability I'd spent years building. I didn't fight dirty. I didn't need to. The truth, laid out calmly, did all the work. Months later, she came back one final time for the last signature on the last document that would formally end things between us. She looked different, not broken exactly, but stripped of the confidence she used to carry so easily. She asked, quietly, if I hated her. I told her the truth. I didn't. Hatred would have meant she still had some hold on how I spent my days, and I wasn't willing to give her that. I told her the real revenge was never going to be taking everything from her. It was refusing to let her betrayal write the rest of my story. I had a home, a life, and a peace I'd built carefully out of the wreckage she left behind, and none of that depended on her ever understanding what she'd lost. She signed the papers. She left. And for the first time in almost a year, I closed the door behind her and felt something close to quiet. If you were in my position, would you have confronted her the moment you noticed something was wrong? Or would you have done what I did and waited until the truth couldn't be denied? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story kept you hooked until the end, make sure you're subscribed. There's another one waiting for you next week.